There's a lot of talk about computer science and software engineering right now. And for that reason, I decided to invite Aditya, who is a software engineer with more than 10 years of experience in the field. Aditya, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really glad that you're gonna, share your journey with us, with high school people or college students, or just people who are thinking about a career change. Can you please introduce yourself to the, viewers and tell me, about your education background and what you've been doing so far for the last 10 years?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Aditya. I'm a software engineer that currently works at a company called Dialpad, so with about 10 plus years of experience. I went to school for computer science at DePaul University, which is back in Chicago. Um, so I would say, to give you some background on like what made me uh, get to this field, is that I come from a long line of engineers. Uh, So my grandfather, he chose to go to college and get a degree in engineering to essentially give him opportunities to like leave the farm and get to the city. My mother chose software engineering to essentially get from India to America to give me a better life and better education. So I guess all my life, engineering in general, but specifically software engineering, has been associated with opportunities, and that's kind of why I headed into this direction.
Mhm.
Mm,
Got
I
it.
think I would say that when I first got into college, I went through all these like majors. They all seemed nice, but they weren't. I guess like being in school, you were taught, okay, like find something that you're super passionate about and then pursue
Mhm.
that. But what happens when you're not necessarily passionate about one particular thing, right?
Mhm.
So at that time, especially during high school when you had to choose a major, I wasn't sure. So out of all the majors, software engineering seemed like something that I was kind of familiar with, but also somewhat interesting. I guess what I'm trying to say is when I was young, I wasn't entirely sure, and that's completely okay. But
Mhm.
I figured I'd give it a try, see where that would take me. And to be honest, after 4 years of college, I don't think I was still sure that I actually wanted to do software engineering. Um, but I wanted to try it out. Like when you're young, you should take the risk. You should try different things. And
Mhm.
and I think my first interview ever was in my senior year of college. And I got the job. And I was like, you know what? Let's try it out. So I packed my bags, uh, it all in one suitcase, and just
Mhm.
flew to the Bay Area to basically
Mhm.
Santa Clara, and I worked at that company for 9 years. This
Whoa.
is Dell Technologies,
Mhm.
and I think the first couple of years, people would ask me like, "Oh, like how are you liking your job?" I would always say like, "I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet." Because to be honest, like at 2021, you're not sure. Like you don't really know what you want, right? Especially when you haven't
Mhm.
really worked for that long. But I think over time, it went from like, oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'll still keep doing this to, you know what, I actually like this. Um, and that's
Mhm.
kind of where I ended up. So it's funny. In college, I uh, I took a class in networking, and I thought, you know what, software engineering is a very broad field, and I thought I'd never have to use it ever again. So I pretty much learned what I had to do to pass the class, and then just forgot about it. And it's funny because I spent 9 years in that field since
Mhm.
I started working. So it's just a fun little story to.
Yeah. And when did you graduate with a computer science degree, right?
Mhm.
Chicago,
So I graduated in 2015.
2015. Okay. So during at that time, yeah, in 2015, probably computer science and software engineering was a little bit in a different place, right? Than it's in 2026.
I
So
would,
I'm
I would
gonna,
say
yeah,
so.
I'm gonna ask you some questions like for to the end of our interview about how, from your point of view, what's going on right now in 2026.
Sure.
Uh, but back to your past. So you decided just to get an internship, yeah, or a full-time position back in college, yeah, in
This
and
is
just move to the Bay
yeah, it
Area.
was a full time position.
Mm-hmm.
I think in my junior year in Chicago, we had one of the really bad winters. I think we call them like a polar vortex year. So I just
Mm-hmm.
remember walking back in class just being freezing. Just I couldn't feel my toes. Like the water
Mm-hmm.
in my eyes is freezing. And I was
In
like, you know what?
Chicago, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was the year. I was like, you know what? Maybe I spent enough time in Chicago, but
Mm-hmm.
let's move out somewhere else. And I
Okay.
figured let's go to the Bay Area because I feel like in this field, if you're in a city with a lot of opportunities, I guess with most fields, if you go to a city that has a lot of job opportunities for you, it's a lot easier to find a job and to just progress in your career. That's kind of why,
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, you know what, first chance, first interview, first job. I was like, I'll take it, and,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very happy about that.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So you mentioned that your mother, yeah, your mom had a software engineering job, and your grandfather was engineering. But what was the biggest factor that influenced you to pursue software engineering? Was it your parents or something else?
So I think although my mom was a software engineer, she didn't necessarily like push me into like going to a particular field. But something interesting she did was, she would share what she learned. Uh, so whether it's robotics or like her major was in electronics engineering, I think, and then she transitioned to software. But so like whatever she found interesting, she would expose me at an early age. So
Mm-hmm.
so I had some exposure to these fields. She didn't necessarily say, "Hey, you need to do this." She just said, "Okay, I'll expose you to a bunch of different professions
Mm-hmm.
as much as she possibly could with her capability and right. And so I just kind of played around with these things, right? And it wasn't necessarily very deep, but it was just like, hey, here's a new like toy or like new like build a robot kit, right? Go play around with it. And that was my exposure to the field,
Mm-hmm.
and it was
Okay.
fun. So I have like fun memories of doing those kind of things, and that's definitely played a role in realizing that okay, like I might have an inclination to this.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
still,
you
again,
think
even after all
your
that,
parents had the biggest influence on you choosing the major in computer science?
I think she had a big influence in exposing me to a bunch of different things. But to be fair, uh, it would be inaccurate to say that like I knew what I wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
as a junior or senior in high school. I really wasn't sure. It just seemed like, oh, like I've had fun doing this. Let's try it
Mm-hmm.
out. But
Okay.
I really wasn't set on software engineering until like maybe 2 or 3 years into the job. Like that's when I
Mm-hmm.
kind of knew that okay, like this is the one for me, right? I was
Mm-hmm.
unsure, and to be honest, like at that age, like every year, like what you want and what you think you want always changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just committed to one thing for a brief amount of time. I didn't really fully commit until
Mm-hmm.
much later, I guess.
Got it. Okay, so you just discovered your true belonging in this field like while you were working full time. Even in college, you just kind of, oh, let's just choose computer science as a major, yeah, because
Yeah,
it's something I know.
yeah.
Got it.
And then, to be fair, I got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, like if there's definitely a chance that maybe I chose this and then I wouldn't have liked it and I would have transitioned, but that's fine because when you're young, it's okay to take risk and try different things because you never know what sticks, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's and I think that was my attitude, and it just so happened that it looks like I chose correctly. At
Mm-hmm.
least I hope so. So that's yeah.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And so, what kind of skills do you think matter the most for someone who just starting out in this field, who, for example, let's say has just graduated with a computer science degree and thinking about not already entering the job, like a workforce? What kind of skills, in your opinion, matter the most for
I
beginners?
think a lot of people think like software engineer is like you're just coding all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think especially as you progress into your job, it's like, yeah, like the coding is only one aspect of it. Uh, the bigger thing is like, are you like critically thinking and like, are you a problem solver? It's not just like, oh, like I just write code, but your job is you get a bunch of requirements and you figure out, okay, how do I solve this? And are we solving the correct problem? And I think it's like mostly critical thinking and just, in all aspects of the job. And then also like having an attitude where you're always willing to learn, because this field, as you said, from 2015 to 2026,
Mm-hmm.
it changes a lot. And I feel like the ones that are most successful are the ones that are always learning, and they're always adding new skills
Mm-hmm.
to their like quiver, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
and those tend to be the people with the most amount of success in the field, and they
Okay.
also tend to have the most amount of fun, because I think like problem solving and learning is the most fun aspect of the job, right? The
Mm-hmm.
meetings and the deadlines, not so fun, but you have to separate like what's fun from not fun, and make sure that like the not fun things don't like you have to make sure that they don't take away from the enjoyment that you get from problem solving, or maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
coding, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And now let's transition to your present. And let's start with your typical day. Can you describe, yeah, just generally like what your typical day looks like? Is it common for software engineers to work remote or hybrid or on site from your, observations? Let's start with a typical day.
So I work hybrid. So I
Mhm.
go to work, about 3 to 4 days a week. Uh, but it varies from every engineer. Some engineers are fully remote. I have a friend that's
Mhm.
not just remote, but global remote. So he works at a company that um, he gets to work from anywhere, from any country, which I cannot do. I have to be in the United States when I'm working. Uh,
Mhm.
in my case, I have to be at work for certain days of the week, for a certain amount,
Yeah.
days in the month, and so it varies. And some people are like just they're always at work. It really depends on the company culture and what you choose. There's
Mhm.
so many different options. Um, I would say that I spend about like maybe 20% of my time in meetings, um, about 50% coding, and the other 50% would be just planning and maybe delegating work to people, and going through that process. So ideally, like I want to spend more time coding. It really depends on like at what point of the project you're at too, especially during the planning phase of a
Mhm.
project. Maybe you spend less time coding and more time in meetings, making sure that usually like most of my work involves dealing with multiple teams. So if my team works on one particular thing, uh, aspect of the project, we have to make sure that we work with multiple other teams to actually release it to people. And so in the beginning phases, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of meetings, making sure that everyone is in agreement with what you're doing,
Mhm.
right? uh, Probably the middle part is when you spend a lot of time coding, and making sure that you're code reviewing too. So if the 50% of my work is coding, 50% is actually writing the code, and the other 50, I would say, of the 50 would be um, reviewing a lot of code. So when a lot of engineers are writing a code in areas that I work in, I make sure I have to, when they write their code, I have to review it and make sure that it's following certain standards, making sure that it goes with my vision of where this particular area of the project is, right.
Mhm.
So that would be my day. The times are pretty flexible, which is what I really like. You can show up as late as 10 a.m. It could be as early as 7, as long as there isn't necessarily like at least where I work. Um,
Mhm.
it's not necessarily like you have to spend 8 hours at work doing work. It's, are you finishing your work on time, and delivering it on time? That's the final metric. So,
Mhm.
some days it could be 4 hours, 5 hours, and some days it could be 10, 12. It really depends on I guess it really depends on how well I'm planning my time, and also like what do I need to do to make sure that this gets out on time.
Okay.
So
Got
the
it.
hours flexible. Sometimes I would say that depending on your team, you could have so to give you an example, my team is about 10 people, and two of us are in the same location as I am, in Pacific time zone. there's about a few others that are in Vancouver, and I think at least 5 of them are in Argentina, which is 4 hours ahead or 3 hours ahead. So sometimes the timings are a bit weird because you have to make sure that you're. If I need to talk to someone, I have to make sure that like our timings are aligned. So maybe I could be taking a meeting later. A lot of our QA team is in India, so sometimes I take meetings at night or maybe early in the morning, depending on. So the timings are very flexible. They're very fluid,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who I'm working with.
Got
But
it.
it's not. There's no like you have to spend 8 hours or 10 hours or 5 hours. It's are
Mm-hmm.
you finishing your work?
Got it. Okay. Yeah, the final result matters a lot. Yeah, and so you mentioned you work with a lot of different teammates, yeah, and a lot of different teams, yeah, all across the company. Let's talk about the people skills here. What is important for a beginner or just any software engineer to know or have in order to have good relationships with people on the team or across teams?
I think it's obviously like you have to be able to. Okay, so how do I put this? So I deal with if you think about it, I mentioned like 3 different countries. Uh,
Hmm.
Canada, Argentina, and India, right? So they all have different ways of working, and so when you're uh, first starting out, it's going to be sometimes for some people they find it difficult to communicate with different people and with the way they're working. So it's very important to have an open mind when you're dealing with different kinds of people, and like accepting that like they work differently or they communicate differently. I think the most stressful part about a lot of like professions is dealing with people, right? Uh, so communication is key. And when I say communication, it's being open minded, listening, uh, actually listening versus like just trying to talk. Uh, and I would say sometimes this is dealing with conflict and learning how to say no. Which comes through experience, right? So I think that's key. I would say the most stressful part about my job is like people, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants different things. They have different agendas, different goals, and the way they go about communicating it is different too. So it's important to listen and figure out how does this person work? How do they communicate? And making sure you recognize those patterns and and you adapt to those. So it's being adaptable is probably the most useful thing. Um, in terms of communication. And are you talking about also like skills like computer science related skills or
Mm-hmm.
just
Just generally, like, because
generally?
when people think about software engineering, they think about technical skills first, but sometimes people don't pay enough attention to working, how to be a good teammate, yeah, or how to work with people from different cultures. I think that's also important in even in tech roles, right?
Honestly, like I would say that a lot of times when we're hiring, it's not
Hmm.
always like it's not only about finding the person that's just the most skilled, right? It's
Hmm.
also about like they use this term a lot. They're like culture fit, which is
Yeah.
essentially like how well do you think they'll work together with the way your team works, right? So if they don't fit that, right, you could be as smart or skilled as you want, but if you're not able to like work successfully within the team and work with others, right? Uh, there's no point. Right?
Hmm.
I think you can find someone that's perhaps less experienced and less skilled for now, and
Hmm.
you can, if they fit well with your team, like especially their communication style, then you can definitely nurture them and teach them,
Hmm.
and like you can help them grow while they're with you, right? And I think that's a big factor when people are hiring is that
Hmm.
it's not just like, oh, did you solve these problems? It's
Yeah.
a lot of it is like, are you able to? So a lot of times in interviews, you get a problem, right? And one of the things we look for is not necessarily, I mean, yes, obviously we look at whether you can solve it or not. But we also see how you can talk it through, Like we try to see how you're able to, how you're able to show what you're thinking to other people. Because usually, like, you're not problem solving in a vacuum. You're working together with multiple people,
Mhm.
right? So how well are you able to communicate what you're thinking to others so that they're on the same page as you, or they can help you solve a problem?
Got it. And my question would be, how can I tell if this occupation is a good fit for me? Who would you recommend it to?
Okay, so first one would be, do you like constantly learning? And because you have to upskill yourself, as you said,
Mhm.
software engineering changed from 2015 to 2026, right?
Mhm.
And it changed a lot from the time when I was a kid watching my mom work to when I started working as well. Um, right now it's AI, right? Like AI is trying
Mhm.
to there's a lot of fear mongering on AI is going to take our jobs, right?
Mhm.
But if you think about it, like throughout our throughout the years, there's always this new tech invention that is essentially trying to um, reduce the number of people that are needed to do a task. And so this, like, every couple of years, there's always this new thing that's going to raise a lot of fear mongering,
Mhm.
and there's going to be a lot of like unknowns on, like, hey, like, where is this field going? It's constantly changing, and you have to be willing to learn and keep like updating your skill set. And so if you don't like doing that, and if you have the attitude that, like, oh, like, I've done my learning in college, now I can just work,
Mhm.
that's usually not the case. So one, you have to be willing to, like, take time out of your, like, day-to-day life to actually learn new things and make sure that you're always learning. uh,
Mhm.
Number two is, like, you should be, every day is a new problem to solve. And if you think, like, oh, like, I did this in university, like, this, it wasn't fun, well, that's going to be your day-to-day life, like, on the regular. There's always new things, like, there's a lot of problem solving, a lot of critical thinking. So if you like doing both of those things, I think you'll fit right in. I don't think that you have to get a computer science degree to necessarily, like, succeed at this field. I think as long as you're able to, like, problem solve and you enjoy doing it, I think you'll fit right in. I've seen people that do, like, that major in physics, that major in, I have one that majored in, I have a friend that majored in economics. I have a few other friends that majored in, like, biology, that all switched over, and they like it because it's a new problem to solve every day. It keeps things interesting, and they like doing it, so it's fine. If you don't like doing that, then it might be a profession that is either your day to day life is not going to be very fun, or uh, what's worse could be, like, 5 years down the road, you find yourself without a job because you've essentially been replaced by the next big thing, whether it's AI or some other new technology, right? So it's
Mhm.
constant change. You should like embracing change, because this
Mhm.
career is, like, this field is always changing.
Anything else? You mentioned lifelong learning and the problem solving. Any like a third thing you think is good for somebody who is a good fit for this occupation?
If you like, so thing is, it's a very broad field. You
Hmm.
can you can go all the way from networking to healthcare to, like, various things. So if you like a certain area and you think, like maybe you like healthcare, maybe you like some aspect of healthcare, and but you also like, coding.
Hmm.
uh, I think you'll find that, software engineering, like, because it's so broad, if you find, like, another passion that intersects with, like, software engineering, I think you're a good fit for that too, because then you can
Hmm.
specialize in that area. And not only will you like you'll find that you like doing both of those things, so that's even better. So if you can find somehow a way for your passions to, like, uh,
Yeah.
intersect with,
Hmm.
computer science, that's even better. A lot of people that are very passionate about their jobs are passionate not just because they like computer science or software engineering. It's because they also like are very passionate about like maybe healthcare or some
Mhm.
other aspect of it. So if you can find that niche that really like you enjoy doing, I think then you're also another great candidate for software engineering.
Mhm.
Of course, like for most jobs, I don't think this is software engineering in particular, but you have to be able to work with people. This is at least for most of the jobs I've done. There's a lot of people skills involved and
Mhm.
communicating and so on. So if you like working in a vacuum, maybe there's some aspect like some field in computer science that you can get that from. But a majority of the jobs that are available do involve like working with people. So you should be able to embrace change, work with people,
And problem solve.
always be learning. Yeah.
Mhm. And so you mentioned fear marketing, yeah, that AIs can take jobs. In 2026, would you recommend people studying computer science right now from your point of view, or what's your take on this?
I think that if you find it not tolerable and you're just doing it for the money, uh, I think those days are over. Where
Mhm.
like just working, just being, just getting into computer science just for the money is like those days are numbered. I think there's a huge saturation of people that are joining for that purpose, and maybe that's not that shouldn't be the primary motivator. Um, so we're like AI is still quite new,
Mhm.
right? And there is some fear that it's going to take jobs. So we don't know yet. We're not sure. It's still changing a lot. Historically, when there's a new technology that comes out that essentially makes your life more efficient, and there's a lot of fear mongering. But usually, like in the past, what's happened is that we didn't stop hiring people. Instead, we just made more. We just produced more.
Mhm.
That's been the case so far, right? Um, but maybe that won't continue. So I'm not saying that in the past like it happened this way. So it's going to be the same case for AI. It's
Mhm.
still in the early stages, so it's unknown. But if you really like the field, and I think you're still going to get a decent amount of opportunities, even with AI. Like there's like even with all the fear mongering, like at some point, okay. So the way I see it is, if you're a more senior software engineer, you can use AI very effectively to do a lot of tasks for you. But
Mhm.
eventually, like once that like workforce ages out, right? You still need new people. Without new people entering the field and like training them and getting them up to par with like senior engineers, right? You're not going to be able to like fill up the workforce. So like you're still needed, right? People are still needed. I'm not saying that just because AI is going to take your job, you shouldn't. I don't think AI is going to take your job.
Mhm.
Probably not. Maybe there might be less jobs available. That could definitely be the case, but I don't think it's going to be completely. You're not going to be completely replaced. So
Mhm.
maybe there's quite a bit of fear mongering. We'll see where it goes, but I think a large portion of that is a lot of paranoia that we don't know.
Okay. And but there's it's still a fact, yeah, that there's a lot of competition in the field. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who wants to work in software engineering, but there's just so much competition going on? Maybe do they have to necessarily work as a software engineer, or there like any adjacent field to software engineering? Um, how can they stand out in this competition?
So what part of it is finding internships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get doing that is very important to landing a job. Um, Maybe part of those internships will involve initially interviewing. So you have to make sure that you're okay. So how do I put this? A software engineering interview tests you on a lot of algorithms and system design, and the chances are perhaps like only 20% of that will actually be used on like working while I'm working. Still very important concepts. So there should be a lot of focus spent on working like making sure that you're good at your algorithms and system design stuff. Because if you can't even if you can't get past the interview, then how will you you just can't get a job to actually
Mhm.
prove yourself, right? So definitely there should be a lot of training and practice with that. Um, I would say that if you can show, especially when you're starting out, like when you're like a new grad out of college, you have no experience to show, right? So what's important is working on some projects of your own and showing that you're able to you're passionate about something and that showing that you're able to you know uh, execute a full project of some sort. It could be a small, it could be large. You could contribute to open source, which so you can do that. So if you're so it really depends. Find something that you really find passionate and just work on it and then show that on your GitHub or something. And I think that goes a long way in differentiating you from you know uh, a new grad that has no experience, showing that you have your personal projects, right? I think that goes a long way.
Okay.
Eventually, like once you start working, I think it matters less because you just have experience and you should just
Mhm.
shown proven track record. But I
Mhm.
think your initial step in is showing personal projects, just to show that how else would an interviewer know that um, that you really like this job, you really want to learn, just by showing your work, right? And that's just another way of showing your work.
Okay. And also, you talked a lot about problem solving, and this is an extremely important part of this career, of this occupation, to problem solve. But what if a high schooler is watching this video, or a college student, and I'm not sure if they love to problem solve? How does somebody understand that they love to problem solve, for example?
Hmm. That's a good question. How did so maybe I got to look at myself and
Hmm.
see how like I like problem solving. That's a good question. A lot of times, I think if you enjoy, if you find yourself like looking at something and going like, oh, like I think I can do it better, or like, oh, like this aspect of my life is very problematic. How can I um, improve it,
Hmm.
right? And you just have this like where you just see things that, oh, okay, like maybe I can do this better, and like what is the problem, right? And I think honestly, I think that college and just in general in high school too, like you are there's a lot of focus on like, oh, like you have to get good grades,
Hmm.
uh, but you have to look at like, okay, like I don't necessarily think that is a good like metric for succeeding at your job. I think it's about like thinking outside the box and like, hmm, how do I put this?
Hmm.
If you have a analytical mind and you think that you can like you see problems of the world and you say like, oh, like this is a problem. If you're able to identify problems, right? That's step one. And step two is like, oh, like how can I fix this, right? Like if you have the attitude of like, oh, like how
Hmm.
can this be better? I think that's like a good metric of like, oh, like maybe like I do like a lot of problem solving, and maybe I can use this to, uh, maybe this could be a good profession for me, right?
Hmm.
And maybe it's not very like generic. Like maybe like so I might not like I can go about my day to day life, and I might not feel strongly about problem solving for like most aspects of my life, but there might be like a couple of things that I really like that really stand out, right? Um, Maybe I really like problem solving when it comes to like technology, right? Like computers, or maybe some other aspect that like is adjacent to computer science, and that could be really useful for you to transition if you find that you just like tinkering with things.
Hmm. Okay, got it. Yeah, there's like a Golden Gate Bridge behind you. I guess that was a problem in the past. Yeah, how to connect people from San Francisco to Oakland, and they just
Yeah,
solved this problem and created the bridge. Yeah. Yeah, okay. We have 4 minutes left. I have two questions for you. I hope we have time for that.
sure.
This is the question I ask all my guests. What are the top three things that you enjoy about your career? And if you have time, we will talk about top things you don't enjoy. Top
Sure.
three.
I think I really enjoy the fact that it it is a profession that where I'm never bored. Like I go into work every day, I'm never bored. There's a lot of work to do. Sure, I'm exhausted, maybe I'm tired, but I'm never bored. Uh, there's always something new to like figure out, and that's super cool.
Okay.
Uh, the second part is that like whatever I work on, I get to see like people use it. The
Mhm.
other day, I went to I was trying to buy a car at Subaru, the dealership, and I was getting notifications, and I was like, oh, is it from my phone? Because I work at Dialpad. Dialpad's like a communication company.
Mhm.
Turns out they were using a Dialpad, and like they were using a feature that I worked on, and that's like super
Wow.
cool to like work on it and like see it being used, right? And
Mhm.
that's like awesome.
Yeah.
Love that. Like it feels like you're having some sort of a influence on other
Mhm.
people in
Yeah.
some small way, right? And
Mhm.
third is like I like the flexibility of it. If I travel, I get to work from home and just not have to like take like just be at work. It it gives me a lot of flexibility, also financially. It
Mhm.
for how much I spent like in relation to my college loans to how much I'm getting paid. It's
Mhm.
decent where I'm able to pay off my college loans, do things that I like. Uh,
Mhm.
so I think the effort to like reward ratio is quite high.
Mhm.
Uh, Maybe that'll change over time. When I entered the field, it was very different than what it is now, but
Mhm.
I think that still stands. So it's
So high earning
really, really
potential.
cool.
Mhm. What about top three things that you not don't enjoy in your?
Enjoy. I would say that there's meetings. I don't
Mhm.
really enjoy meetings. I think the hardest part is communicating with people, and meetings actively take away from my time, like doing what I love. But it has to be done.
Mhm.
It's a necessary evil. I'm not saying eliminate all meetings; that
Mhm.
they are needed. I would say that the second most thing, I would sometimes the hours can be long, because you're at the end of the day you're measured on what are you delivering something on time. So though they can be short, sometimes they can be long depending on like what you're doing. uh,
Mhm.
and the third would be also another aspect of ours, which is we work with with teams from different countries, so sometimes you might have to take meetings at weird times to make sure that you're both like
Mhm.
able to communicate and like speak to each other. So maybe
Mhm.
that aspect is not so great all the time, especially if
Mhm.
you have time constraints. I think
Got it.
those, but they're very minor. To be honest, quite minor.
Mhm. Okay, I have one question. In one sentence, can you tell me what is keeping you in this field?
Not boring. It's not boring, and
Boring.
that's why it's never boring. It's never. It's always interesting. There's always something new that
Mhm.
I can spend time on and spend time thinking about. And
Mhm.
that to me is the most important thing. I should not be bored at work. If I'm bored at work, then I'm will not want to go to work. I will not want to do work.
You will
And
quit. Got it.
exactly. So that I
Okay.
think that's like the biggest driving force for me is that I'm
Mhm.
never like bored. I'm always like, oh, that's cool. Like usually my attitude is like, oh, like that's pretty cool. I've learned something new today.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to use that, right? And
Got it.
that is like so valuable to me.
Well, thank you, Aditya, so much for coming today for this podcast and sharing your journey with us. I hope a